Let me give you an example of an argument with an implicit premise that expects you to do the work. All right? Extraterrestrials, that is to our terrestrials, don't exist, semicolon, otherwise they would make the headlines. We have one sentence. This is an argument. Extraterrestrials don't exist. Otherwise, they would make the headlines. This is an argument. What are our reflexes? What is our first order of business? Now that we know this is an argument, what are we doing? Yes, Al?
Look at the two claim.
Yeah. What's our first claim?
Extraterrestrials don't exist.
How do we number this?
1.
Exactly. Otherwise, they would make the headlines.
The claim is they would make the headline.
In this case, you can put they would make the headlines, but the otherwise now is, let's say you'd have to rephrase that, they don't make the headlines. So I would keep this in because you lose a lot of information. If you keep it out, you'll have to change some things. The otherwise is kind of negating. They actually don't make the headlines, is what they're saying. Or if they, right? They're not actually making the headlines. So let's number this too. Otherwise, they would not make the headlines. Who's they?
Extraterrestrials.
Extraterrestrials, thank you. ETs. Right? Otherwise, ETs would make the headlines. 1, 2. Good. We got it. Now, second order of business. What's the conclusion? Well, actually, 2 orders of this. First one, we carve. Second one, we substitute on examples. Then, we spot the conclusion. What's the conclusion? Extraterrestrials don't exist? Who agrees? Should agree, that is the conclusion. Extraterrestrials don't exist. So let's put it as a diagram. Extraterrestrials don't exist. You think extraterrestrials don't exist? Why do you think this? Because?
They would make the headlines.
Yeah, if they did, they would make the headlines. Alright? If they did, they would make the headlines. Right? We got our argument. Now, there's something else going on here. There's a lot of unsaid. There's an implicit premise. Here's how we're going to tease it out. Alright? First thing you do is you're going to retranscribe this. It's always going to be, at least for the sake of this class, the way I'm showing you this, it's always going to be, you're going to have 3 lines. The first line, at the very bottom, or the last line, whatever you want to call this, is going to be the conclusion, then the premise, then the implicit premise. So, IP, P, and C. IP, P, and C. Like a sandwich, top bun, meat, bun. Top bun, meat, bun. IP, P, C. Like this, mechanically write that out. Rewrite your conclusion in paraphrase. I'm giving you the recipe and the instructions. How do we tease out an implicit premise? Read out your conclusion and paraphrase it slightly if need be. The conclusion is extraterrestrials don't exist. Right? ETs for short don't exist. Not much need for paraphrase here. Try to make a simple sentence. And when I say paraphrase, it is just capture the essence of what's being said here. ETs don't exist. Why? What's our premise? What's our premise again?
They would make the headlines.
Yeah, otherwise they would make the headlines. So basically, we can paraphrase this as ETs don't make the headlines. ETs don't make the headlines. Right? Now let's just look at P and C. When I'm looking at each claim, what are we talking about? We're going to try to explicit the topics that are being discussed. So we call this the topic method. What are the topics being discussed? Just look at this. What are the topics? On the one hand, we're talking about extraterrestrials. Let's underline this. And what's the other topic? Existence. Wait, just this one. Just look at this one. So, just looking at this line, the 2 topics are extraterrestrials and existence, whether or not things exist. Those are the 2 topics. Go, let's go for the other line. What are the topics? ETs, exactly. ETs, and making the headlines, or headlines, making the headlines. Right? You guys see that? Roughly speaking, if you take each standalone proposition and you ask yourself, what are the topics being discussed here? If I say, I don't know, we're going to the Blue Jays because we're poor. irrespective of if that makes any sense. What are the two topics? Being poor and going to the Blue Jays. Right? You can clearly see that that's what I'm talking about. What are we talking about here? What we're going to do, once we've identified these topics, is we're going to number them. Let's call ETs 1. Once we've adopted the convention of saying that ETs is 1, it's also the same topic here. You guys agree? Same topic. Let's call existence, whether or not something exists, the whole topic of existence, 2. And let's call making the headlines topic 3. So far we got 3 topics on the table. You guys all got that? Now the topics are related. Imagine a triangle. So the second step of the method is, once you've got your sandwich, you're going to build a triangle. Triangle means 3 angles. All triangles are trilateral. They have 3 sides. You're going to have topic 1, topic 2, and topic 3. What is topic 1? ETs. You write that here. ETs. That's our first topic. What is our second topic? Existence. Whether or not something exists. And again, the word topic is well chosen here because it's not about not existence, it's just about existence. What are we talking about? Right? Existence. And 3, the headlines. And I'm running through this one step by step, and then we'll do another one, and you guys will have a little more active part in filling in. So we got a triangle here. ETs are related to existence. You guys agree? There's a claim relating it to existence is the conclusion. ETs are related, topic 1 is related to topic 2. Alright? Topic 2 is related to topic 1. Topic 1 is related to topic 3. You guys see that in the premise? So we have a triangle, but it's missing a side. It's missing one side. You guys see that? It's got 2 sides so far, and it's missing this side. We'll put this in a dotted line. We're missing a side that relates the topic of existence to the topic of making the headlines. That's what we're missing. Once we have done all this, and notice how this is mechanical. This is purely mechanical. Once we have all this, we know that what we're going to need as a top bun, which is going to be our implicit premise, which we're always going to put into square brackets to remind ourselves that whoever's the author of this argument didn't actually say it. They didn't say it. We're going to put the words in their mouth. And we want to track that fact. So we're always going to put this into square brackets. If we want to reconstruct the implicit premise, we're going to have something that's going to need a relation of bringing together these 2 topics. Existence and making the headlines. Then we let our intuitions kick in. What would be the most sensible proposition that we could plug in that combines the topic of existence and the topic of headlines and that would seal this gap? Yes, my friend?
Things that exist make headlines.
Things that exist make the headlines. That's the assumption. Hey, if it exists, it's got to make the headlines. Things that exist make the headlines, or always make the headlines. Bravo. Things that exist is topic what? Things that exist. Topic what?
Well, actually, I think it's there. We're committing ourselves to more than is necessary and saying things.
Well, you're a philosopher? Kind of? No, not really. Not really.
You're saying extraterrestrials, if they exist, and
No. See, extraterrestrials is a different topic. We're just talking about existence, right? There's a sense in which if I'm committed to the existence of this chalk, I'm not talking about extraterrestrials. I'm talking about if I say, well, things that exist, weigh something. That's a general claim that could include extraterrestrials, but it's something different. Topically different. That's why we're talking about topics. So we just want to combine 2 and 3. We got 2 and 3 in here. Where's 2? Where's 2? 2 is about existence. Things that exist. Fair enough. We got our same topic again. And what's 3? Making the headlines. Now we've done it. We've sealed the gap. And to show that we've sealed the gap, we're going to circle it. We've sealed the gap. Now the ultimate test, to make sure we teased out the correct implicit premise, is to run down this way and state it out loud. Things that exist always make the headlines, or things that exist make the headlines. Again, it's paraphrase here, but we're on topic because we just got these 2 topics and nothing more. And you know what? Extraterrestrials don't make the headlines. Therefore, extraterrestrials don't exist. Now that makes perfect sense. We've managed to state for the author what the author was assuming you would assume in order to make the argument go through. The author needs to assume the implicit premise IP in order for this argument to go through. It's implied. That's why we call it an implicit premise. It's implied for this argument to run through as we made it run, which was 2, therefore 1. He has to conjoin it with a missing assumption, A, and we're always going to use a lowercase alphabet letter, A, B, and C, and so on, which is what the convention is in the textbook itself, to signal an implicit premise. Now we have reconstructed, put this in a whole box, we have reconstructed a proof of A. So instead of, when you go from, let's say, having 2, therefore 1, and you go with something a little richer, that's 2 and A collaborate to give you 1, and I ask you, where did you get this A? This is your proof. Once you have this, it's irrefutable that that A is required and what that A stands for and how you extracted it from the contents at hand, instead of just relying on your intuitions. You can rely on your intuitions, but it'll only take you so far, and they're liable of running amok, going crazy, going all over the place. Here's the classic example, for instance. If I say, I'm inviting my girlfriend to dinner tomorrow, what sort of assumptions am I making? If you ask a philosopher this, well, you're assuming that the world will still be there tomorrow. In the very act of asking her, you think she's intelligible and speaks your language, and he starts pulling all these assumptions and you go completely overboard. Hold on. I'm just assuming just very little, right? So come to dinner tomorrow, right? You're assuming that you're going to have food. You're assuming, I am making all these assumptions, right? Okay, I'll grant you, as a philosopher, I can grant you that strictly speaking, but the idea is we want to pare them down to the ones I'm actually relying on in order to run an argument. Not all the speculative stuff you could pull out, which are the ones that are actually doing some heavy lifting in the argument, and here, this is doing the lifting. Yes, my friend?
If you replaced things with ETs, would you mark it as wrong?
Yes. Because what I want you to do is stick, and these examples are always going to be simplified. So all the implicit premises that I'm going to ask you to extract are always going to be very simple, right? Or I want you to stick to just 2 topics. You would introduce a 3rd topic if you did that. And your mission was, when reconstructing the IP here, the top sentence, right, the top proposition, the implicit premise, just to combine existence and headlines in a way that makes this run through. That's all you were asked to do. That's it. So keep it mechanical. Let's do another one. Let's keep this whole thing in here because it's always going to be basically the same structure. And let's do another one. And this time you guys are going to help me out a little more because you know this, you know the method. Right? Let's erase this. Erase this. We have a method now. Let's erase all this and let's start with the fresh one. And you guys will have a handout with lots and lots of examples to practice from. Then should not be allowed to drive. He drives too slowly. Dan shouldn't be allowed to drive. He drives too slowly. This is an argument. What's our first reflex? What's our first order of business? Let's chop. Can someone help me chop? Chop away, yes, my friend? Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, Dan should not be allowed to drive.
Dan should not be allowed to drive. Correct. Let's number this. 1. Let's move on. Again, same person.
He drives too slowly.
He drives too slowly. Let's number this.
2.
2. Second order of business. Someone help me out. What do we do now? Yes?
Change he to Dan.
Change he to Dan. Guys. Cool. I like this. All right. Good. Then what? What do we do? Spot the conclusion. Spot the conclusion. What's the conclusion?
Dan should not be allowed to drive.
Dan should not be allowed to drive. Dan should not be allowed to drive. All right? So here. Dan should be allowed to drive. That's our conclusion. By a process of elimination, my friends. What's the premise? Help me out. You smile, you know it. It's on the tip of your tongue.
Dan drives too slowly.
Dan drives too slowly. Dan drives too darn slowly. Don't put in the darn. Alright? Dan drives too slowly. Then what? Let's look at our topics. Let's start at the bottom bun. What are my topics? Dan should not be allowed to drive. What are my two topics? Dan
And drive.
driving, or being allowed to drive, or drive, right? Again, this ballpark topic, right? I'll be allowed to drive. Let's call this 1 and 2. Let's look at the premise. What are my topics? Again,
Dan and slowly.
Dan, let's call this what? What number? Yes, why? Because we've already committed ourselves to calling that 1. We've labeled it that way, right? And driving too slowly. Driving too slowly. Driving too slowly. Let's put it in our triangle. I'm going to redo this triangle and clean it up a bit. That's messy. Let's do our triangle. 1, 2, 3. What does 1 stand for? Dan. Someone else scream it out. What does 2 stand for?
Drive.
Driving. Or allowed to drive. Roughly. 3. 3. Being slow. Or you can just use one word. It's mainly to remind you visually. 1 is connected to 2. 1 is connected to 3. What connector do we need? 2 and 3. So we're going to need something that combines the topic of being allowed to drive and slowness, or slow driving. Now we've almost sealed the gap. We've brought everything so close. All we need to do now is kick in with a bit of common sense. And what proposition combines the topic of being allowed to drive and slow in a way that seals this gap? Yes, Anna, can you go for it?
Slow drivers should not be allowed to drive.
Slow drivers, exactly. Slow drivers should not be allowed to drive. Slow drivers should not be allowed to drive. And again, if you can paraphrase this in a way that's even more succinct, more power to you, so long as you don't lose too much information. Just 1 second. Anna, in what you gave me, where's, because our mission was to seal 2 and 3. That was our mission. Where's 2? Yeah. Should not be allowed to drive is topic 2. And where's 3? Slow drivers. Slow drivers. Now we've sealed the gap. 1 is related to 2, 1 is related to 3, and now 3 is related to 2. We've sealed it. Then the final step is, and I'll get to your question, the final step, we run it this way, and we scream it out loud. Does it make sense? Imagine someone accosting you on the street and saying, you know what? Slow drivers shouldn't be allowed to drive, and I know this guy, Dan, and he drives way too slowly. Therefore, Dan should not be allowed to drive. Make sense to you guys? Crystal clear argument. And at this point, that person's giving you all the information because it would have stated the implicit hand in your hand. And so instead, again, our basic structure was 1 and 2, if you would have put it in a map, in a diagram, right? The conclusion was, Dan should not be allowed to drive, supported by 2, and now we have a justification for the implicit premise A. That's what we had. We had our hands up. You had first, you and then me. Yes?
Why would slow drivers are not allowed?
Same thing. Slow drivers are not allowed, that would be fine. But are not allowed changes it a little bit. I'd rather we stick to the should, right? Because that's more sort of taking liberties and changing a little bit. But it'd be in the ballpark. It'd be in the ballpark, and that would be okay. You'd still, again, the idea is you'd still be sort of bringing down your intuitions and reporting down just to the basic minimum. You got your 2 topics. I wouldn't bicker over that. That'd be just fine. Yes?
In this implicit premise, we're considering slow driving the specificity.
Speak up, my friend.
In this implicit premise, as opposed to the one we just did, we're considering slow drivers an essential constituent of the implicit premise. But wouldn't that be the equivalent of including aliens in the one we just discussed?
I don't see that at all.
Because here you could just say something like slow moving, drivers is a measure of specificity that's not included in.
Okay, halt all those reflexes. All right, again, it's the same sort of going. There's a sense in which if I was doing another class, let's say on skepticism, or on, some other philosophical topic, I said those are appropriate.
It's not necessarily skeptic, it's just the definitional concept.
Whatever you want to call those intuitions, put a cork in them. They're going to backfire, right? And so the idea is, look, it's just common sense. I could just ask you, because David Kelly asks you this, when you suspect, here's his recommendations, when you suspect that there's an implicit premise, try to seal the logical gap and do so in the way that's most economically possible, that commits you to the least things possible. That's all he tells you. That's not very helpful. Those are the only recommendations he tells you. I'm basically taking the same moral, but giving you concrete tools to mechanize the process. You're still sealing the gap, but instead of just using the metaphor of sealing the gap, you know specifically what we mean by sealing the gap. And when I say committing yourself to nothing more than possible, what I mean by that is just topic 3 and just topic 2. That's it. That's it. So basically it's the same thing as your textbook, but now you have a method. So that way, when you plug an A in there, and I say, where the heck did you come up with this A? You can give me a proof, a demonstration, written down, and I will expect you to do so on the test. There's one final question, it's going to have an implicit premise in it, and I will say, prove me why does an implicit extract it, you need to use this method. So we'll wrap up on this. IPPC. Topics numbered, make a triangle, remind us what the topics are, explicit those that are already related, those that need to be related, relate them, and you're done. You guys get that?